Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to Football Friday. Just 11 days out. 11 days out from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting training camp. Football Friday here on Birds 365. That's John McMullen, Eagles insider, Eagles beat reporter, NFL insider, Johnny Mack. I'm Zander, Krause, your host of Birds 365. Welcome, everybody, in on this Friday. Johnny Mack, how you doing on this Friday, brother?
Doing well. Only 2 more Football Fridays before training camp begins. So, yeah, we're really getting close to the countdown.
Only one more, good, Johnny Mack. We only got next Friday.
Well, we got to get through this one, so I'm counting this one. So,
okay, yeah, that's true. All right, so we got this one, and then we got next one. That's true. Just started here, so you're right. We got 2 more.
Yeah, so we're getting closer, though. We're creeping up.
We certainly are creeping. For anybody that's been tuning in all week, we've been going through our training camp preview. Johnny Mack has been chronicling that over on si.com/NFL/Eagles. Great reporting. We did the quarterbacks, we did the running backs, we did the tight ends, obviously starting on the offensive side of the ball. Today, we're going to talk wide receivers. I got some good questions for Johnny Mack coming up later in hour number 2 of the show, so we will do them. And then in hour number 1, we will have guest Paul Domowitch. Just 16 minutes away from Damo. So we will get to Paul Damo. We'll get to some cornerback questions later in the show. And then an overrated Eagles players segment. Yesterday, we did players. Johnny Mack says he's going to get himself in trouble.
It's going to fire. They don't like when he criticizes people.
I might get myself in some trouble on that segment as well. But we'll do it. We'll have some fun. It's all in good fun. As we prepare 11 days out, like I said, from training camp. Johnny Mack, let's dive into the receivers, man. You went through the preview. I know we've been talking about it a lot, but for the sake of the segment, for the sake of going through each position group as you are on si.com, how are you viewing the receiving group as a whole before we get into the nitty-gritty of it? The receiving group as a whole before training camp.
Well, it's hard to complain when you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. So that's where it starts. I mean, this is an organization that for years struggled to find meaningful wide receivers. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's a bad position.
Yeah.
It's arguably their best position as long as those guys stay healthy. I mean, Carson Wentz once sent the franchise record for passing yards for this team and didn't have a receiver over 600 yards. Now you got a guy who threatens to crack 1,500, it seems, every year, and Devontae Smith, who's well over 1,000 himself. I mean, I said it before they ever played a game together with Jody, and he pushed back a little bit with me. I said, this is the most talented tandem the Eagles have ever had, ever, period. And people said, whoa. And I said, I'm not talking best because that demands, production and longevity and things like that, but I'm just talking from a talent standpoint, and I think people have seen it now. You got 2 full seasons with these 2 guys together. It's not even close. The Eagles have never had this before. People go back to Mike Quick, our buddy Mike Quick, and Hal Carmichael. They barely played together. So that doesn't count. Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin were very good, but they're not these 2 guys. I mean, it's just the best tandem the Eagles have ever had, and it's arguably the best tandem in the NFL. So that's the good stuff. And then the bad stuff, that's it. I said yesterday on the show, I think I got worse from Quez Watkins, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Julio Jones, the stew of that. If anything, they got worse than that. And it won't affect that much if those guys, AJ and Devontae, stay healthy. But I mean, the depth has to be a concern because 2 day 3 picks, Anais Smith. I know our buddy James Carver's out there. We'll give him a shout out for the Anais Smith president of the fan club. Look, hopefully he becomes a big time player, but we're talking 2025, 2026. There's a developmental aspect to that. Same thing with Johnny Wilson. Hopefully the Eagles don't have a great history of development, bringing along developmental receivers. It's been Devontae Smith finished product, and that's basically it. So there's some concern there. And then Paris Campbell, John Ross, large sample size haven't produced. So, I mean, you can cross your fingers. There's a lot of crossing fingers with all over the place on this team with these veteran sort of lottery tickets, but you're more likely to get Greedy Williams and Justin Evans than you are to get Chris Long and Patrick Robinson, I would say.
Yeah, it's just the reality of it. Sometimes the cookie crumbles in your direction, and sometimes it doesn't, especially when you're playing in that game. John, before we get into more of the receivers, I want to ask you a question about Aaron Morehead. He's the wide receivers coach in Philadelphia. For those who do not know, Aaron Morehead, Eagles wide receiver coach. What do you make of Aaron Morehead? I mean, you remember before we had Aaron Morehead, there was kind of a lot of talk about nobody liked the wide receiving coach.
Turnover.
Yeah. What do you think of Aaron Morehead? How does he resonate with this team to you? How much of a role do you think he plays in getting these guys up to par? I mean, when you have guys like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, you're going to look like a good wide receivers coach. Those guys are finished products, highly skilled players. I more look at the back end. I more look at the next couple receivers. Like, that's where Aaron's money is made. How do you view Aaron Morehead?
Yeah, it's kind of it's fun. First thing I say about Aaron is survivor, man. I mean, he came in at the end of the Doug Peterson era, which wasn't great, obviously. And you mentioned that turnover. It seemed you had the constant churn. Every year you had a different receiver coach, Greg Lewis, Gunnar Brewer, Aaron, and every year they turned it over. And I know when Nick got the job, Aaron was looking for other jobs. He thought he was out. New coaching staff, new head coach. He's going to want to bring in his own guys. They didn't have a relationship together. And, for whatever reason, sometimes you can't line up with the people you want. And Aaron, Nick interviewed Aaron and said, all right, let's give it another shot. And I remember the first training camp of Nick Sirianni. I mean, Nick played receiver in college, for those who don't know. He coached
He's
receiver.
got an extensive background at that position.
Yeah. And he paid a lot of attention to the wide receiver group in 2021, his first season in training camp. I mean, a lot, to the point I would joke about. I mean, is he the receivers coach or is he the head coach? And I think he wasn't comfortable with Aaron, didn't know him, as I said, and really sort of micromanaged it at first. And now here we are, and he's been here for 5 straight years. This will be his 5th year. But you're right. I mean, AJ and Devontae are going to be good no matter what. And it's about developmental. And I haven't seen a ton of developmental. That's all you can look at when you're talking about assistant coaches. He played the position himself. He's very big. It seems like, he speaks the same language as the big receivers, and the Eagles got a ton of big receivers, starting with AJ. And I think he has to work at sort of understanding what the smaller guys need to have to succeed, because he's 6'3". So I think that's a battle with every position coach. When you talk about reputation and assistant coaches, I don't think it's off the charts like Jeff Stoutland, but few are. So I think he's done a good job. And the fact that he's been able to stay as long as he has in Philadelphia, of all places, which had constant churn at that coaching position, I think speaks to something as well. The fact that he's able to bridge and communicate and teach to where people think he's valuable.
Yeah, I mean, seems to be like he's a good coach. I mean, the interesting part of the dynamic you laid out to me is Nick's background in wide receiver play. Like, you would think he would come in and that would maybe be the one position where he would be like, I got my guy at that spot. I know who I want to be the receivers coach. And Aaron was already here, and he interviewed Aaron, as you mentioned, and the rest is history now. Going on 5 years for Aaron Morehead. So pretty good stuff from him, John. Now let's dive into the group. We already know that A.J. Brown is your wide receiver one and one of the best ones in the league at that. And you have Devontae Smith, probably one of the best wide receiver twos in the league at that. After that, it's as you've mentioned many times on the show, it's quite the cliff. Where are you on slot receiver? Not backup outside, but slot, where the majority of the reps in the slot position will come. Is it a guy on the roster? Is it Paris Campbell? Is it John Ross? Or is he somebody out there that we haven't picked up yet, or how he's still looking to acquire or make a trade for?
Well, right now, I think with what you have, Paris would be the heavy favorite going into training camp. Now, Howie's always looking to, he constantly tells you that talent acquisition season doesn't end with the draft or just after the draft or undrafted free agency. It goes all the way through the summer and really up to the trade deadline. So there's opportunities to make moves, and that's a position where he might go to camp and say, all right, let's see what we have. And if it doesn't impress him, very similar to linebacker last year when they came into camp, and then all of a sudden Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack showed up. Could be that type of situation. If he looks at it and says, how I think it's going to shake out is the fact that the rookies aren't ready. Probably wanted a little bit more than Paris Campbell and or John Ross. And he might look to add something at that point. So I think it's still an option that happens, but Paris Campbell will get every opportunity to prove that he can be a productive player, and who knows, playing with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown is certainly going to help him. He's never going to see a double team, I can tell you that. Nobody's going to be paying any attention to him, so there's going to be an opportunity, and maybe the big knock on Quez Watkins shouldn't have been the traffic or the number of receptions. The big knock on him should have been when the opportunity was there for him to make a play.
Right.
Too often he didn't make it. And that's what Paris Campbell has to do. Maybe he can do it.
Right. It's not about volume. It's about when the ball comes your way, when your number's called, you got to step up.
Exactly. And again, nobody's going to be paying attention to Paris Campbell when you have AJ and Devontae and Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley. So he's going to have an opportunity to be open and make something happen.
For those who don't know, Paris Campbell, a 2019 second-round draft pick to Indianapolis. He had one not very productive, but he had one pretty good season in 2 years ago, where he played all 17 games. He had 63 receptions on 91 targets, 623 yards, an average of 9.9 yards per catch, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's not a bad season. If you're looking at anywhere close to those type of numbers, which I don't think he will because of our top 2 guys, maybe it's more with 400 to a 500-yard range. But if he can do that, I think that's a pretty good, slot receiver there. Now the concern is last year, as you pointed out, John, 12 games played, only 20 receptions and 104 yards on the lowly New York Giants, who really don't have much of anything at the wide receiver position. So he got benched or didn't play much in New York, which I guess is somewhat concerning. But again, that 2022 year, somewhat promising. Let's hope we get that type of Paris Campbell in the offense. Johnny Mac, how about John Ross, the other guy who would he be if you just listed the wide receivers in a depth chart, not in any specific position, just 1 through 6. Is John Ross your 4?
Yeah, but I don't think it, because one of the things, when you talk about roster building, I think how he's kind of pigeonholed himself. I mentioned that yesterday, and the fact that he's not cutting an Smith, and he's not cutting Johnny Wilson unless they're just abject disasters over the summer. Right. And that's probably not going to happen either. So he's keeping those guys. So that's 4. You got the best punt returner in football, whose secondary job is receiver, and Britton Covey. That's 5. You're only going to keep 6. So even though, yeah, I would put Paris Campbell at 3 and John Ross at 4 in a true meritocracy standpoint, only one of them is going to make the team, the initial 53. Now, maybe that's fine because you can put veteran guys on the practice squad now. You don't even have to get them through waivers. They're both vested. I think John's vested. He played 4. So they don't even have to go through waivers. So you can do the wink wink thing and say, look, we need the roster spot. Just sit in the hotel for a day and we'll bring you back and put you on the practice squad. Then you can elevate them. So in other words, God forbid AJ or Devontae sprain an ankle against the Packers and you need a receiver. You're not going to throw Johnny Wilson out there in week 2. You're probably going to elevate somebody like Paris Campbell or John Ross from the practice squad. So I think that's the way Howie will handle it. But yeah, kind of pigeonholed himself from a roster building standpoint with those 2 day 3 receiver picks.
Yeah, you're right. He really did. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what he does. We got Paul Domowitch in the green room, so we will get to our commercial break in just a second here. Jenny Mac, let's hit this super chat just real quick. Rashid Mixon, thanks for the 199, man. We appreciate you being here this morning. Appreciate everybody in the chat for being here this morning. What type of situations QBs did J. Ross, John Ross, and PC Paris Campbell have? I mean, in Indianapolis, Paris Campbell, who was his quarterback? He was there since 2019, so he must have.
Well, he went through the churn of Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett,
Right.
Phillip Rivers, and that's when Nick was there. But I mean, Andrew Luck and Phillip were pretty good when it came to getting the football to receivers. So I'm not giving him a pass there. And he had the one good season in the walk year, maybe that. And I don't even want to put good on it. It was acceptable as a 2nd round pick. The weird thing about Paris Campbell, he's a 4.3 something guy. He's a fast guy. And he averages 9 even in his good season, he averages 9.9 yards per catch. That indicates a lot of quick throws, dump offs, maybe not.
That was Matt Ryan, his quarterback that year.
Yeah. So, and Matt, by the way, is another quarterback. Say what you want at that stage of his career, but volume guy at the bare minimum. So, Luck, Rivers, Brian, there's that constant churn, but you got high level volume quarterbacks with the exception of Jacoby Brissett. And last year with the Giants was an absolute disaster for everybody. And that's the excuse making machine of, the Giants don't have this, Giants don't have that, and that's the reason everybody stinks. Well, somebody's got to be good, and you're getting benched with a bunch of guys who stink. The Giants stuff just bothers the hell out of me. You can't make excuses for everybody and assume the minute they get out of the New York Giants, it's a bad organization. It has been. It continues to be. Ever since they moved on from Tom Coughlin and Mark Ross, but too much excuse making with those guys. And Eagles fans should know about the Giants more than they do because they see them twice a year.
Yeah. And then John Ross, I think he had like Andy Dalton when he had his best season.
Well, John was a top 10 pick. I mean, he just had a lot of injuries. He himself admitted that put him in a dark place. He was having a lot of personal issues. He's got talent, but he hasn't played since 2021. He's still young, but that's when you talk about lottery ticket, that's you can't build your foundation on John Ross. Hopefully he figures it out. He seems to have matured. And he certainly has, as I say, the descriptor he always used. He's got traits in his body. You can see that. You can see he's a high level athlete, but it's tough to count on him.
Tough to count. We'll get to our commercial break. After Damo, we will finish up on wide receiver talk. I just want to get into the rookies, Anais Smith and Johnny Wilson. We'll talk a little bit about them, Pajama Johnny, who we dubbed him yesterday. So we'll talk about a little bit about him in hour number 2. Coming up next is Paul Domowitch. Thank you all for being in the chat this morning. Appreciate all of you guys. Make sure you drop a like on the show. Stay tuned. Paul Domowitch next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Friday edition of Birds 365, joined now by our weekly Friday guest, Paul Domowitch. Domo, how you doing on this Friday, man?
Doing well, guys. How about you?
Good to see you, Damo. Hope you had a happy 4th. A little bit of a respite from the grind that seems to be 365. That's why we call it Birds 365. We're constantly talking about this team, but it does get to be a chore in this little dead period, I admit, Damo. Now we're getting close. Anything change from you in the perspective of what you want to see out of this team in training camp? I'm kind of like debating between, is it just about, the mechanics of getting this offense installed, or is it more about figuring out, is this a legitimate contender?
No, I mean, I think they just need to give Jalen and the rest of the key guys a lot of training camp reps. I think we'll see them play a lot more in the preseason than we have in the past. Well, maybe not a lot more, but, I think Nick's going to change his approach a little bit. He's not going to put these guys at great risk with a lot of contact and stuff, but they've got to pick up, they've got to get to the starting gate in September with this offense down pat, with Jalen knowing exactly what he's going to do when he has the ball. So, I mean, that's what I want to see this summer. I want to see more of the first team. I also like to see him pick up a slot guy. I don't know that.
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
I
Yeah.
don't think that's going to happen. I mean, it seems like Howie's content to go with the guys he has, the rookies, and Paris Campbell and John Ross. But I mean, Hunter Renfro's still out there. I mean, I love that guy, and I'd want him.
I'll tell you what, I want to see Britton get a chance. Again, pajamas, hat tip to Bobby King. I love that description in the spring. But the difference between Britton Cubby and all the backup receivers when it came to generating separation, it's like it's not even close.
Yeah.
So at what point, I get it. I mean, they list him at 5'8". He's not, I don't think he's 5'8". And 173. I don't think he's 173, but I mean, the game's changing a little bit. It's become, you see small guys all over, whether it's, give him a chance. I think he'd surprise people.
I mean, I'm totally for that. But he made such great strides last year as a punt returner. I don't want to put too much on his plate. I'd like to see him continue to be a guy that's a threat on punts. So I wouldn't.
Well, there's a bunch of people that want him off the team, Damo, because they want Cooper DeJean returning punts. I'm like, no, I want him to focus on, maybe being the slot corner or some kind of, big nickel safety, whatever they're going to do with Cooper DeJean.
I've never been big on putting a defensive guy back punt returner because, you're basically out on the field previously for 4 downs.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You might have run a deep route against a guy, and now you got to go back there and return a punt. Well, you're clearly still, sucking air a little bit. And I've always preferred if a team could do it, to have an offensive guy.
Dion could do it. Just ask him. Yeah, Dion could do it.
There you go.
But he was a great returner, but that's a great player. So yeah, I'm with you. I'd rather have an offensive guy just in general. I mean, It makes sense to me. Those are the guys who used to have the football. So not that the occasional Isaiah Rodgers, he might be the kickoff returner. We'll see how that shakes out. And he's a defensive back, but there's a few guys, but I'm with you in a general principle. I'm surprised how many people, though, want, and maybe it's Anaya Smith, and want somebody else to take the punt return role because Britton Cubby can't help you elsewhere. And I'm like, he was the best punt returner in football. What are we talking about? Why would you want to go away from that?
Why does anybody care whether he can't help you elsewhere?
That's true.
They're not in charge of figuring out a 46-man game day roster. And the rules are so liberal now with, you can put, taking people off, putting people on.
I know. It's not as fun, by the way, Damo, in my opinion. Because I was just talking about the roster. Like, I think how he pigeonholed himself at receiver by drafting the 2 3 guys. Because they're not going to help you, but he's not cutting them. And I'm talking about Anaya Smith and Johnny Wilson. Yeah. So right there, bang, that's 4. Britton's the punt returner, that's 5. And then you pretty much have to decide between Paris Campbell and John Ross, I would think, as that last guy. They're kind of battling each other, even though if you just did it as a meritocracy, they're probably your 3rd and 4th best receiver.
Yeah.
The practice squad mitigates that because you'll probably get either one on the practice squad if you want them.
Yeah.
And then if they have to play, you can just elevate them.
Yeah. You were mentioning earlier on the show about the depth at wide receiver, and that is a concern. I mean, I don't see the benefits of keeping both Paris Campbell and John Ross, but if something happens to Smith or AJ Brown, you've got other ways you can. You basically would be changing your offense. I mean, because then you would have to really think about going heavy with your tight ends. throwing more to the running backs, which you don't like. So
No, I don't. Yeah.
but
Well, I don't like it with this quarterback. Give
yeah.
me Phillip Rivers. I like it. I want to dump it to Saquon, 3 times a drive. It depends on who I have. With this quarterback,
he needs to acquire a taste for it.
Yeah. Which I'm not sure you want to acquire a taste for it. But I got to kick it. Like when they signed Devontae Parker, who I got to meet once for a press conference, I'd never seen him play, and I already miss him. I'm like, wow, that would have been nice to have Devontae Parker. That's where we are at wide receiver.
Yeah.
How important is it, Dama, when you have guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith as your top two? Then you have Dallas Goedert. Then you have Saquon Barkley. I mean, admittedly, we all know they're not going to have a huge role in the offense, but how much does having a threat at wide receiver 3 open up the the field for everybody else? Or, is it just they got to be able to answer when their name is called on?
I mean, I guess the way Howie and Nick approach it is that, I mean, I'm guessing because of the people they've had at slot over the past few years here, that they just feel that slot can also be tight end, can also be running back, as far as how how a quarterback looks for that guy when A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are covered. I mean, I've always thought having a good slot guy was always important, because that's why I was one of the few guys that was big on Greg
Ward.
Greg Ward, yeah,
because he was a former quarterback. He and every quarterback he played with were always on the same page. He was a great zone buster because he knew where to be. And I was alone on that. I mean, he had one good year, and Nick had no use for him when he got here. But so, I mean, I've always felt that having a slot guy that a quarterback can lean on when teams take away your outside guys is critical. I don't see that guy right now, but then, I think this offense is going to be different. I think we're going to see more from Dallas Goedert this year as a receiver. I think we're going to see more two back and throw into those guys. So. I guess that's the way they're approaching it, rather than worrying too much about having a slot guy. And then they're basically figuring, well, we've acquired all this speed at slot in Campbell and Ross. Maybe they hit on that. Howie's always been a guy that thinks speed kills, and
speed does kill.
Yes,
but, maybe
comes surprises everybody and has a hell of a year. I don't know. I don't expect it. But we'll see.
Well, just from a pure talent standpoint, Dama, you're known as the king of 12 personnel to us all. Exactly. I mean, they're better. If you want to just put your best players on the field, if you have Dallas as the flex receiver and CJ Uzomah as the inline tight end, if CJ's got anything left, because he was a good player in Cincinnati, that's better. I think he's better than Paris Campbell, John Ross, insert name at wide receiver 3. But they're not going to do that because all these coaches want to spread the field. And if anything, they want 11 personnel and 4 guys, 5 guys. You're going to see a ton of Saquon split out and then maybe rotates back into the backfield. But you're going to see a ton of empty looks, 4 wide receiver looks. But CJ's a better player, so I'd like to see it, but I just don't think they're going to think that way.
Johns, I mean, I don't, at least early on this season, I don't think spreading the field is going to be a real good idea. I mean, you're basically going to have 2 people at new positions on the offensive line, a new center. I mean, granted, he's moving over from right guard, but he's still new at center this year, a new right guard. So you got to do one of either 2 things. You play a lot of 12 personnel and have that extra blocker, or you get rid of the ball quicker, which is why I think the running backs are going to be a factor.
Yeah. Dama, we've been doing our training camp previews that John McMullen's been doing on SI.com. We started quarterbacks, running backs. We did tight ends. I want to ask you about Dallas Goedert. How big of a role could he have in this year? I think it's going to be bigger with Kellen Moore. He seems to be an offensive coordinator that likes to spread the ball around a little bit more. I mean, Dallas, his biggest problem has been staying healthy. It's not so much his skill set, but do you see him having a bigger role in the offense this year?
Yeah, I think I do, Zander. It's hard to say somebody's going to have a bigger role when you've got those two guys on the outside because the natural thought process is you got to use them. You're paying them a lot of money, you throw them the ball, and that's true. But I think I think Dallas should have a bigger role in this offense, especially on third down. I mean, if you look over his entire career in the NFL, he's never been a guy that Jalen has looked to on third down. The numbers are very, compared to some other, compared to people like Travis Kelce and people like that, his numbers on third down are really lean. And I think that's even though last year they were one of the best third down teams in the league.
Yeah.
I think you can be even stronger if Goedert becomes a weapon on third down.
What is the disconnect with obviously, I mean, it's the collapse. I mean, nobody looked good. The offense didn't look good. The defense obviously didn't look good. But to Nick Sirianni's trademark 30,000-foot view, Damo, you mentioned their third down success. They were better on third down than they were in 2022. They were better on fourth down than they were in 2022. Is it as simple as just take care of the football better? Jalen had 15 interceptions total in 21 and 22. He had 15 last season alone, and then he had 5 fumbles lost, which were a career high. He had 9 fumbles, which has been weird. The last 4 seasons, he's had 9 fumbles, 9 fumbles, 9 fumbles, 9 fumbles. He lost 2, 2, 2, and then 5. Is it as simple as just this offense is really going to be good if they take care of the football because there's so much talent?
I think that's a big part of it, John. I mean, you're right. You look at the numbers last year, even down the stretch in those 7 games when they only averaged 18 points a game, which was, I think in the first 11, they averaged maybe 25. I mean, we're talking about a touchdown difference there. Their third down numbers were good. Their red zone numbers were good. The only horrible number that just jumps out at you is the turnovers. So, yeah, I think that's going to be huge. I think they need to be more successful on early downs with the run game. But I mean, you kind of saw cracks early on last year, even when they were offensively, when they were playing pretty well in those first 11 games and went 10-1. I mean, you could just, there was some uncomfortableness about some of the things they were doing.
Bubble screens.
Yeah. You wondered whether it would catch up with them. It did. But, I mean, the defense was a contributing factor, too. I mean, they were horrible in those 7 games. And they were suddenly leaving Jalen in the offense with long fields and things like that. So, but, yeah, I mean, I look at this offense this year. I mean, I expect Jalen to be better. I look at the weapons he's got. I look at the running backs. Other than injuries playing its, kind of killing them with either the offensive line or somewhere else, this looks like, an offense that can put up a lot of points this year.
Yeah, it sure does. Damo, I'm going to ask about one more position on the offense, and that's the right guard. Tough to tell when we haven't seen much, obviously, of a guy like Tyler Steen. But they're in a little – I mean, I trust Jeff Stoutland, but Tyler Steen played tackle at college. It's definitely a different position for him to play. Mekhi Becton's another guy that they're talking about who could play that position. They seem to like him a lot, but also another tackle-dominant player. What do you think happens at that position? And to me, it's the weak spot on the offense. Is it the weak spot for you on the offense?
I wouldn't discount Matt Hennessy either if he's healthy. Yeah, I mean, Stout's been pretty successful with moving guys inside or outside. So But yeah, we don't, we don't know. I mean, he knows better than we do about whether Steen can slide in and play, whether Becton, who's has very limited experience at guard, and is not exactly your stereotypical guard considering his size, whether he could play inside. So it's going to be one of the things to watch this training camp. I mean, it's clearly a position that they've got to get right to protect Jalen. So we'll see. But I mean, right now, I don't think any of us knows the answer to that.
No, throw Max Sharping in there as well. When Max showed up, he's got like 38 NFL starts.
Yeah,
I get the feeling just from that Jeff Stout wants a lot of contingencies, and like somebody will work. You go back to the Super Bowl season. A lot of people forget Isaac Seumalo got benched. And the first guy in was Chance Warmack before they even got the whiz, Stephen Wisniewski. So, I do think they have a bunch of contingencies. So one of them should at least be able to give you competency at that particular position. But I don't know if you saw it, Domo. It was last week, Justin Pugh came out and former played with the Giants, obviously, was a first-round pick back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And he had essentially, he wasn't playing last season, and he came back to the Giants when they had all the injury issues. Well, he had a chance to sign with the Eagles when they were 7-0, and Cam hurt his foot. I believe that was the foot injury. And they wanted to bring Justin Pugh in to play right guard. And that would have been interesting because he knows how to play.
Yeah.
And, he would have reminded me because they were not happy with Sue Opeta. Sue had a bad game. That's when they put Tyler Steen in, and Tyler was even worse, and they had to go back to Sue Opeta. So, yeah, I think there's some concern at right guard. I wonder what would have happened, too, if Justin would have gotten here and signed here. Would they have went back to Cam Jurgens? Because I'm not sure they liked Cam Jurgens at right guard. And that concerns me a little bit now at center. So all this Justin Pugh stuff, which I had not heard, and he said flat out, Eagles wanted to sign him. Now, he's a player. It could be one-sided, but makes some sense to me. And that brings up a little bit of a concern with Cam Jurgens as well.
Yeah. I think Nick's approach, or Howie's approach right now is, okay, we kind of like these guys. We think, I drafted Tyler Steen and, really high. Let's see what they can do this summer. If it becomes evident sometime in August that none of these guys can play right guard, then he'll make a deal, or he'll go get a veteran. So I don't think he's going to panic. I think he figures he's got it. I'd rather have a question mark at right guard.
Well, that's true.
Than I would at left tackle or right tackle. So
yeah. That's rich people problems when you're complaining about the right guard.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's fair. Defensively, though, I've said it all the time. It's kind of, they got a lot of, it's just unproven all over the place. I'm pretty high on Bryce Hupp. I think he's going to be a good player, but it's unproven. Nolan Smith, unproven. All the young corners, unproven, essentially. Devin White, that's another cross your fingers. Hope you can tap into the athleticism and maybe fix the discipline issues. Zach Bond, unproven. Nakobe Dean, unproven. It's like sort of almost, Vic will figure it out.
Exactly.
Is Vic going to figure it out?
Well, I think he'll figure it out, but I think some of these guys are going to turn out to be pretty good players. Assuming some guys. I mean, I think Nakobe Dean is going to be a really good player if he can stay healthy, and that's a big if because he hasn't. He didn't last year. You're always worried when a guy has a history of like that now with a foot injury. I'd still like to see them go out and bring in Justin Simmons. I mean, safety isn't a crying need if Reed Blank, if you believe.
I think it's their most certain position, safety.
Yeah, I'd still bring him in.
And by the way, it's uncertain because CJ's always hurt.
Yeah,
but I mean, and Reed got hurt, but Reed always gets hurt for one game and then he's back, which is kind of weird. But he's got to figure that out.
You can, safety is so close to linebacker now, as far as a positional likeness, that having one more safety helps you at two positions, and especially when it's a guy like Justin Simmons who knows Vic's defense so well. It's probably not going to happen.
I'm sure Vic would like him.
Oh yeah, he'd love it. But I just think some of these guys are going to pan out. My biggest question.
Don't forget Sydney. They love Sydney, and Sydney's going to be back early in the season.
And I like Sydney. Yeah. He was over. His biggest problem was his aggressiveness. He seemed to act before he thought, and
it's like his hair's on fire. Yeah, sometimes he's outrunning the play.
But I like the kid, and I think he's going to be, he's going to be one of those guys that's going to be a pretty good player. My biggest question defensively right now, John and Zander, is that line. Like you said, it's not that it's not a good line. It's that there's so much uncertainty right now. We don't know. I like Huff too, but he's never been an every down linebacker. No. Nolan Smith, what was last year? I mean, was it just a guy that they decided to hold back and wait until he was ready, or is he not going to be a player? What about those tackles? I mean, are they going to play? Are they going to give them a full year? Jordan Davis is glad to hear he's drinking, low sugar.
Cut out the Arizona teas, man. Cut out the Zonas. You got to cut those out.
What's the ceiling for this defense? I mean, I know it's definitely a lesser talented side of the football compared to the offense. Everybody's pretty high on Vic Fangio being the coordinator. What's the ceiling for this defense? With given what they have on the roster.
I don't think there is one. I mean, I don't. I mean, there's a lot of talent there. We just don't know, how quickly some of it's going to develop. The younger guys. I mean. I love the fact that they went out and got two corners early. And just like I've said this many times, it reminds me of 2002, when they got Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown. But Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown ended up being terrific players. We don't know about these guys. We think they're going to be good players, and if they are, that's going to set them up for a while. Is Devin White going to become disciplined and play like he did when he went to the Pro Bowl? We'll find out. I have a lot of faith in Vic. I've known him a long time. I think he's going to figure out a solution to making all these pieces work. I don't think, early on, I don't think it's going to be like we're going to say, wow, they're holding everybody to 6 points. But I think you'll see, by the 5th, 6th, 7th game, you're going to see a really good defense.
The thing that impresses me, I probably told you this before, Tomo, about Vic most is just everybody, like he creates almost a sense of security. We're talking about insecurity. It's like I compared it to poor Sean Desai last year. Like everything we second guessed everything. Right. You put Bradbury in the slot, we're like, what are you doing, dude? What slow down. And meanwhile, Vic comes in the spring, Damo. In the spring, he's got Quinyon Mitchell playing dime linebacker. I said, if Sean Desai did that, we burn the city down. And with Vic, we're like, all right, we'll see how it works.
Keep the faith in Vic, yeah. And if they don't play well early, it'll be like he can't relate to all these young kids. And
that'll be the narrative.
I do think there's an element of ripping the Band-Aid off too with this defense. Like I got asked on another show the other day about should they bring in a veteran corner, because everybody talks about how hard it is for communication in this defense. And I'm like, what? And just delay, getting these young guys on the field. So like to your point, Damo, I think they're going to get good, but I think it's going to take them 6 to 8 weeks at least, maybe longer. And then you come into next year with all of your key players on defense outside of linebackers who are already under contract. And if the more playing time they get this year, the better they're going to be set up, in the future, so I think there's an element to this defense as well, where you got to get the young guys on the field early and often, and it's going to help you now this season and in the long run.
And the best thing for a young defense, Zander, is an offense that scores early.
So true.
We saw that 2 years ago, 2022, when the Eagles just, first half, for second quarter particularly. I mean, second half, it was all, teams playing catch up, and you were just, their line was able to just go after quarterbacks. So if that happens this year, it's going to make life a lot easier for Vic's defense.
Yep, absolutely.
At P Damo, make sure you follow Damo on X, Twitter. I read him at the 33rd team. He'll be gearing up for WBCB with the season coming up. I'm gonna get you ready for the season by getting you in trouble, Damo, because we're gonna do this segment after you're off. So I want you to kick it off. Give me the most overrated player on the Philadelphia Eagles.
Huh, boy. Boy, I'll say AJ Brown.
Whoa!
Wow.
Whoa, I did not see that coming.
I did not see that coming either.
I'm not sure how early I agree with my own pick, but I mean, overrated in that he's a year older. We're talking, we've been talking about using Dallas Goedert more. Teams last year found ways at times to take away AJ.
Wow, I like it. You're taking some of the heat off me too. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to take heat, John, after Damo goes. That wasn't Damo, everybody. That was Damo's like alter ego that's here right now on this show. I don't know if Damo believes that.
I think AJ's the best football player on the Eagles. But I get it from the standpoint of what you're saying. I think what you're saying is
I do too.
Statistically, maybe he takes a step back because people are trying to stop him. They're game planning to stop him. Maybe Kellen Moore wants to spread the football out a little bit more. So all of a sudden, if 1,450 yards becomes 1,200, people start to say, "Oh, what's going on?"
Yeah, right.
What's going on with?
I just have a natural dislike for wide receivers.
Well,
except for Mike Quick.
Is that a PSD for TO? Is that?
Yeah, it really is.
ETS.
I've never gotten over 2005.
Don't blame me. Damo, thanks for joining the show, man. Great as always. You're one of the most knowledgeable guys, obviously a Hall of Fame selector. So very well respected all around the football world. We appreciate you being here every Friday on Birds 365. We'll talk to you next week. All right, Damo?
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Yep,
thanks, Damo.
There's Paul Domowitch joining us on Birds 365. Johnny, man,
yeah, I love
not
that.
expecting that.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I disagree with it, but I love it. But I hear what he's saying because
no, I do too. You're right. I mean, he goes 1,450 and 1,500 back-to-back years. If there's any sort of pullback, you know what I mean? People start asking the question.
Yeah. Thanks, Damo. No, yeah.
Took the pressure off a little bit, right, Johnny?
Oh yeah.
You know what's interesting? Real quick, before we get to a break, something you said earlier in the show that I've been thinking about since you said it. You said it right in your opening monologue, basically. Carson Wentz threw for 4,000 yards with this team, and he didn't even have a receiver break 600 yards.
Nope.
That's. I don't know another word to say about that other than that's insane.
It is insane. And that was a lot of people. We're talking about that yesterday with Ed Krause about Dallas Goedert. Like people are saying, well, he's got to get up to, Zach Ertz cut 100. Well, there's a reason. Zach Ertz was the number one option. And Dallas has never been the number one option. And guess what? If Zach Ertz in the prime of his career was with a prime AJ Brown and a prime Devontae Smith, he would not have been the first option. So he would not have caught 116 or 118 or whatever it was. Just the way it works. But yeah, they struggled for years to find wide receivers. You had a little bit Alshon obviously delivered in big spots in the Super Bowl. Was a great receiver, a lot of injuries. Then, sort of the descent in his career. He's never the fastest guy to begin with, but he was a good player. But, Nelson Aguilar never developed as a first-round pick. Jalen Reagor never developed as a first-round pick. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad at
really
wide
bad.
receiver and that's why there was so much turnover in the Peterson era that we're talking about the coaching. Constant turnover because the wide receivers were always, I don't even know if you can call it underachieving as much as they just didn't have a ton of talent.
Yeah, and I think the guy that year that was the leader, wasn't it Travis Fulgham?
Well, yeah, you had that 4-game stretch of people were so excited. I remember being out in Pittsburgh for the Steelers game with Travis Fulgham, as I like to call it, the Travis Fulgham game. That was in the COVID era, so no fans in the stands, very few fans. He had that weird run, and he was just a poor practice player, evidently, because the coaches couldn't wait to go away from him.
Saquad says Fulgham fever, baby.
Yeah, it was one of the weirdest spikes you're ever going to see, and he did nothing afterwards.
Nothing. I don't even think he's in the league.
He bounced around a bit. I know he's in Green Bay. They brought him back. He was in Green Bay before he came here, but he did nothing after that stretch. It's like an anomaly. Not at the same stage, but I always talk about the Devin White anomaly in the playoffs. He played that 4-week stretch like he was one of the best receivers in football, and then just boom. When he left here, he went to Miami, Denver, Green Bay. Now he's with the BC Lions in the CFL. Travis
Fulgham, an NFL team and a receiver to the CFL that quickly, it can all change. Very quick. The one thing I would say about that is I do think it's a big credit to Carson Wentz. There's a lot of this fan base has a sour taste in their mouth. And I get it that, part of it is rightfully so in terms of the way it's soured and the way it looked and all those things. And I understand it. But the more you get removed, I would urge everybody to be grateful for Carson Wentz, because without him, we don't have a Super Bowl right now. And people that will say that that's not true. That is 100% true. We were 11-2 or 10-2, whatever it was, when he went down in LA that year. And we had already secured basically home field advantage through the playoffs. He played like an MVP caliber quarterback, and he was a big reason. So, look, I know the contract didn't pan out, but essentially we paid $132 million of Jeffrey Lurie's money so that we could call ourselves Super Bowl champions. I think.
Yeah, I hope people realize, I've been saying that for years, that you don't have a Super Bowl without Carson Wentz. I hope people realize that. 100%. I think most people do.
I think most people do. I mean, especially our viewers. I think we have smart viewers. I mean, I know they are smart because I read their comments all the time and for 6+ hours a day. I think they know that. I mean, maybe there's some out there that don't, but I think they do know that.
So it was I just pulled up Travis Fulgham, the Pittsburgh game I was talking about. 10 for 152 and a touchdown. And then, his 4-week stretch, that was the only monster game. Then it was 6 for 75, 5 for 73, 6 for 78, 3 touchdowns over that span. He's got 38 career NFL receptions. They all came with the Eagles in that season. He's never had a reception anywhere else. 27 of them came over those 4 weeks. That's it. That was his whole career, was those 4 weeks.
Guy built a career. Did he ever get a contract, a bag? Did he make any money off those 4 games?
No. He was still a very young player, so he's still on his rookie deal. But he bounced around, undrafted guy. But as I said, bunch of teams: Green Bay, Denver, Miami. He bounced around all over the place. As sort of, if you look at the receivers now, the Jacob Harrises of the world, the Austin Watkins. People probably don't even know these names. Shaq Davis.
Yeah.
That's what he was. One of those guys on the back end of rosters. Broke in as a 6th-round pick of the Lions. Then he went to the Packers. Then he came to the Eagles, Dolphins, Broncos, back to the Packers. Now CFL.
Travis Fulgham, we thank you for your services here in Philadelphia.
Travis Fulgham.
Let's get the commercial break, Johnny Mac. Oh, by the way, before we do that, I do want to thank James Carver. I didn't want to bring it up because it was during the guests. I try not to interrupt guests with stuff like this. But James, thank you, brother. 50 memberships he gives out to our viewers. So James Carver, we can't thank you enough for your contributions to the show. All your great comments. You're a very smart football mind. Very smart guy. I've talked to James outside of the chat before. Very smart guy. Very cool guy. Very supportive person. And we appreciate his support here on JAKIB Sports and on Birds 365. Can't thank him enough. So, James, thank you for doing that. For anybody that got a membership from James, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a loyal listener of our channel. We can't thank you enough. Johnny Mac, let's get to our commercial break. Coming up on the other side, we are going to talk about a little bit of cornerbacks. I'm going to talk about Isaiah Rodgers with you. It's an interesting setup with him in that I think he's a good player. I don't know what his path really to being on the field is. We'll talk about that. And then we will talk about overrated Eagles players. Damo started us off.
Damo made it easy. He should be on
I got one in my mind.
He should be on WIP for that one.
Yeah, right. That morning show should call up Damo and say, "What the hell?" So we'll do that segment next, and we'll wrap up this week on Birds 365. Just 11 days to go, everybody, until the Eagles report to camp. So good stuff. Stay tuned. Birds 365. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Friday edition of Birds 365, July 12th here, just 11 days out from the Eagles reporting to training camp. The dog days of summer are almost behind us. Hope everybody is staying safe, staying cool, and enjoying their summer days. I know you guys, a lot of you guys are doing it here with us, which we appreciate. And when you're not here with us, I hope you're enjoying your time, hopefully with some family or friends or whoever it is you want to spend time with. Maybe it's just yourself. Either way, whatever you guys like, I hope you guys are having a great summer. Johnny Mac, one comment I want to hit on before we dive into our topics, and it's a short one. Let's just move on from it quick. But a coulda, shoulda, woulda type of thing. It's crazy how each domino falls and how things change. Slager says, I have always wondered if Wentz would be the Eagles QB now if Roseman had taken Justin Jefferson and a good defensive player instead of Hurts in the second round, instead of what he did. It's very true. I mean, when he takes Jalen Reagor, it falls apart. Oh, that was kind of the start of, I don't want to say the start of the end, but Carson needed a receiver. He was supposed to be that guy, and he did not pan out to be that guy. Now, if he had Justin Jefferson, who knows what Carson maybe could have done with him. Would have been crazy coulda, shoulda, woulda type of scenario, but interesting to think back on as an Eagle fan.
Well, best receiver in football, the Eagles could have had him. The Eagles probably should have had him.
Yeah.
The scouting.
We had a couple people saying they were already dreaming of an Eagle Green because he's on that new Netflix show now.
Yeah, I mean, the scouting staff wanted him. The coaching staff wanted more of a Tyreek. I laugh about this to this day. More of a Tyreek imprint, Tyreek Hill type imprint. They wanted to stretch the field vertically and horizontally. And they felt Jalen Reagor was the guy to do that. Well, people get evaluations wrong all the time. I mean,
yeah,
Justin Jefferson went 22nd. I mean, there were a bunch of teams before, I believe 22nd, a bunch of teams before the Eagles and Vikings who could have taken him as well. And they would have been happy, obviously. Now, some of it changes with the quarterback. He wouldn't have put up the same historic numbers because, Kirk Cousins is such a high volume thrower. I talked about that with Jody a lot. That factors into it as well. So it's a good situation for him to put up numbers. But he's great, and he would have been great here. And obviously they made a mistake. But the more important part of that two-pronged effect, you can't the collapse of Carson Wentz didn't have much to do with Jalen Reagor. It had a lot to do with Jalen Hurts. So as long as you're not taking Jalen Hurts in the second round, maybe things could have changed. But he did not take that well. He did not handle it well. And that's on him, by the way. I mean, you got to be a professional. You got to be able to handle things like that better. Happens all the time in the NFL. Whether it's, Aaron Rodgers wasn't happy when Green Bay drafted Jordan Love. Famously had the drink and bourbon, and he's like, "Oh, that's interesting." And he went out and played at an MVP level. That's how you handle it.
Yeah. And his fears were ultimately justified. I mean, they drafted him.
But it's different from the standpoint of Aaron was old. He's older now, but he was even old at the time. And you're starting to think about it. The Eagles pick of Jalen Hurts was a weird pick.
It was.
To the point where I say it all the time. I got word that they were going to draft Jalen Hurts early. And I put it out on Twitter early, and I second guessed myself because I only had one source, and I'm like, should I put this out? This is nuts. Why would they do this? But I put it out there, and they picked him, and it was crazy. I hesitated because I'm like, this makes no sense, and they picked him. So you generally don't do that with a quarterback at the age of Carson Wentz after paying him all that money. And I get why Carson was upset by it, but you got to be a professional. You got to handle it better. So he could have overcome a bad wide receiver pick if he wasn't completely shaken by the selection of Jalen Hurts.
Yep, that's how it all that's how the cookie crumbled. But in a way, it's a good thing. Here we are now with one of the most talented offenses in the NFL. So the pullback for the comeback is how I look at it. So now we're in a good position here in Philly. Johnny Mac, I'm gonna do let's do the overrated Eagles players first. I want to go into that and kind of have some fun with that. I'll give you a crack first. I can go if you want me to, but I'll give you the first crack.
I mean, it's simple for me. It's simple,
Okay.
and it has to do with not seeing the players up close. Because when I talk about it, I'm talking about the outside expectations. Now I can go my most overrated players, and it would be different. But from the fan bases, it's not even close. It's Saquon and it's Devin White. Not even close. They think Saquon's a superstar, and they think Devin White's going to be a Pro Bowl linebacker. A lot of them. I'm not saying I'm not lumping everybody. I mean, they're going to be so upset when they see them play. It's going to be crazy. So from that standpoint, for me, it's pretty easy. If you're talking about Saquon's a very good player, Devin is not. Saquon's more of again, unrealistic expectations. It's funny. Art Stapleton covers the Giants. He does a very good job. And he wrote about Saquon's legacy with the Giants before the final game against the Eagles. I remember to this day, I remember the whole thing was about his impact off the field, which is awesome. Dude's awesome. His community, Walter Payton Man of the Year nomination, does all this. Everybody loves him, leader. There wasn't one sentence about his impact on the field. He had some good seasons, but I mean the Giants record with Saquon Barkley is atrocious. Which is not all his fault, but again, if you're the player that people think you are, you're not. The number's 25, Zander, 48-1. They did not win football games with Saquon Barkley.
No, they did not.
And they built their whole foundation on Saquon Barkley.
Which, I mean, look, that's not great for the player, but is that on the player, John? I mean,
well, that's the thing, but again, at some point you got it. It's not fair. I'm the first to admit it's not fair for quarterbacks, never mind running backs. There are people out there trying to help you win games, and unfortunately, from the negative side, losing games. But when you have that kind of sample size and you're expected to be that kind of player, and people mock. Look, you can't mock Dave Gettleman, who was the Giants' former GM that drafted Saquon Barkley, and then turn around and mock Joe Shane for getting rid of the guy. Yet we have this because there's this incredible excuse-making machine because this is a good guy. I'm just talking purely on the football field. You want to talk about the best player in Giants history? That's easy. And he wasn't a good guy off the field. And that's Lawrence Taylor. And he was a monster on the field. And they won a lot of games building their foundation on Lawrence Taylor. Maybe the greatest defensive player of all time. Guys at that level show up. I say it all the time. Doesn't matter what position. You just talked about it with Justin Jefferson. Doesn't matter where he went, he would have been a good player. Maybe it varies from the number standpoint, from outside, but I went through it with Randy. Guys like that show up. Randy Moss. They show up.
Yes, they do. I'm with you on that. John, you said that those would be your fan overrated. Do you have different ones for your overrated? I'd like to hear them if you have them.
Yeah, because in the case of Well, different one offensively, because I think Saquon's a good player, and I try to emphasize that as much as
Yeah, and
possible.
you've been transparent about that, so he wouldn't
Yeah.
be overrated from your perspective.
No, he's a good running back. He's not a great running back. Um, if I were to say most overrated, and it's got more to do with age than anything else, and it has more to do with status than anything else. Sort of what Damo did, and probably get me even more trouble. Lane Johnson's going to the Hall of Fame. He's not the Lane Johnson he was when he didn't give up a sack for 30
Yeah,
straight weeks or
right.
whatever.
That makes
The,
sense. I
the,
was
the
thinking about him.
decline has started. Still a very good player, but he's not what he was at the
Yeah,
the
your
height.
body just can't handle that type of
Yeah.
load like it can, like it could years ago when he was a little younger.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, and he is a great, great player, but the decline has started. And you could say the same thing about Darius Slay on defense.
Okay,
Probably.
that's what is that where you were going on defense?
Yeah.
Because that was mine on defense is Darius Slay.
Well,
And it's not,
Devin's the obvious one. I mean, Slay can still play.
yeah,
Like,
I just meant more from the, because my first one was going to be Darius Slay on defense as overrated. And it's not a knock on the player. I actually like the player very much. I just, similar to what Damo said about AJ. I mean, he's just getting old. He's not like this bona fide lockdown cornerback one that you would think you have when you say a guy like Darius Slay. At least I don't think he's going to be that anymore. And I think he's taken a step back. I think there's been moments in games where you see fans all over social media chirping about him. And there was a lot of those moments last year. Darius Slay would be mine on defense, and people are not going to like mine on offense, Johnny Mac. I got news for you.
Jalen Hurts?
That's where I'm
I
going.
consider Jalen.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah, I get it.
Mine isn't a knock on the quarterback though. And look, this is a tough segment because I have to pick one. And when you lay out the offense, I don't think AJ's overrated. I don't think Devontae's overrated. I was going to go Dallas Goedert because, people talk about him like this great tight end, and he's really never done. He is great, but he's never put up that type of productivity on the field. The offensive line, I don't see it. Saquon, I'm not in the boat of where I think he's this insanely elite Christian McCaffrey type of player. I go Jalen because I think too many people are talking about him like he's Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow.
Well,
and I don't think
where
he's that quarterback. I think we can win a Super Bowl with him. I think we can go the distance with him. I think he can be as good as we need him to be to complete what we want to complete. We saw it in 2022, but I just don't think he's this top 3 quarterback skill set wise.
Well, I think Jalen's interesting because he's so polarizing. Like, I think you have a group that thinks he's what you just said, but he also gets a group that hates him. So for me, it kind of evens out. Like those people that put him up with Patrick Mahomes, yeah, they overrate him. But then you have this other group that says, oh, he stinks. He can't do this. He's terrible. He's not top 10. And that sort of mitigates it for me. So you have a bunch of people that think he can't play, and then a bunch of people who think he's, without balls. So he's very polarizing. To me, it kind of evens itself out. He's very similar to Saquon in that he's just really good. He's probably not a true superstar in the method of going to elevate people around him. They're very similar. They're very good players. They're not great, great, great players.
Yeah, I agree. BMO says we missed Slay. We did say Slay, BMO. I'm not sure if we missed it or what, but we said Slay. Slay was our first one for each other on defense. So that's look, I don't like to go the Jalen Hurts route because you're going to get the haters out in full force. And I'm not trying to say I don't like the quarterback or whatever. I believe we can win with the quarterback, but yeah, I mean, I just don't see him as this elite guy. Like when I do my top 10 quarterbacks, Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Burrow, that's 4, Rodgers, Stroud, Herbert, Love, Stafford. You could even put Dak Prescott in there. That's 10 right off the top of my head. And that leaves out guys like Jared Goff. I mean, there's other guys out there. I'm not saying Hurts isn't top 10. I just think he's in that tier where you could put him anywhere from 7 to 12, and I would understand the logic depending on who you talk to. I don't view him as a bona fide top 5 quarterback. I just don't. And I don't think that's a problem. I think we can win with him.
No, I'm with you. He's not a top 5 quarterback. And for those people that think he is, yeah, they probably overrate him. But I do think you have that other group that you don't have with other players that think he's really bad and think he's bottom 10 starting quarterback. Like you don't have that group for Saquon. You don't have that group for Slay or somebody, maybe Slay because of his personality more than anything else that rubs some people the wrong way. But yeah, for me, it mitigates it a little bit. Like you don't have anybody looking at Saquon Barkley objectively. Anybody. And I don't know if it's related to, again, his nature, the fact he's such a good guy. I can't explain it. It's sort of this weird equation of pedigree and reputation and being the nicest guy in the world. And nobody peels back the onion and say, hey, what's going on here? Well, I mean, this is not what it's supposed to be. So that's why I would lean towards. You got a bunch of people hating on Jalen Hurts. A bunch of people.
Yeah, that's true. That's good context. I mean, it's not like he's one of those people that's, everybody is pushing him one way. Dabney brings up a good point. Hurts took Rager and Quiz to the playoffs. I think Hurts is vastly underrated. So, I mean, that's a fair point. He did have a good year where he led those guys back from 2-5 and led, not the greatest team to the playoffs, which you're right. I mean, it is impressive. Dre says, I don't believe that Jalen is just a good player, and y'all need to get this one-sided way of thinking when it comes to the QB position. His skill set is more valuable than most of the QBs Zander named. And I think he's referring to the dual threat type of quarterback. I get it, Dre. I hear you, brother. I appreciate your input. I appreciate your comments. I'm not dismissing what you're saying at all. I'm just telling you how I feel. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of good comments in the chat talking about this, obviously. But anybody else, John? Any other player on the team that we think is slightly overrated?
I'm trying to run down the list. A lot of people think Jordan Davis stinks, so he would be more underrated than overrated. I think it's too early. So many of the players on defense are young, so. Are Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean overrated? Probably for early expectations, but
yeah, that's fair.
That to me is meaningless. That's just the nature of being a first round pick. Everybody thinks they got the next great player, and numbers, statistics alone tell you that's not going to be the case. Jalen Reagor, Nelson, I mean, you can go down the list of Eagles first round picks and how many misses you have. Andre Dillard doesn't always work out. Just the reality of the situation. You're playing the numbers game there. But overrated? No, I think it's way out in front for Saquon and Devin. And it starts with the pedigree. It starts with one guy was the number 2 pick and the one guy was the number 5 pick. That's where it starts. And forever, people have a really difficult time overcoming that and saying, it's not working out the way it was supposed to work out.
Yeah, on offense, if I had to go one more, I would do what I said earlier. I would go Dallas Goedert, just because I think there are people out there who think he's a top 5 tight end. Maybe
I'm one of them. Yeah,
but maybe I think he is skill set. but he's never showed it on the football field in a consistent way, John. He just hasn't for me. I mean, I even look at guys like Mark Andrews in Baltimore. I look at the guy, who's the guy that the Lions picked up? Sorry, I'm blanking on his name right now. I think he's
Sam
a great
Laporta.
Yeah, and who was the other guy they had before him with the long
TJ
hair?
Hawkinson.
Hawkinson. I mean, I'm not saying they're better than Dallas Goedert. I'm saying they're used better, and he has a bigger impact on the game than I think Dallas Goedert does at times. And that's why I would go Dallas Goedert is slightly overrated.
Well, with Dallas, I said, again, I think Zach Ertz is the perfect comparison because he was here before him. Zach Ertz was the number one option in the passing game, and he put up big numbers.
Right, so it's different.
Yeah. Dallas could catch 80 passes if Devontae wasn't here or AJ wasn't here, and people would probably think of him more highly, but the Eagles wouldn't be as good. So I'm to me, there's more, Dallas has been a very impactful player on a very good team. And that's, is he ever going to be rated up there with Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews and George Kittle? George is probably the closest because he's not the number one option on San Francisco, never has been.
Yeah, true. And probably never will be. I mean, to be honest,
probably never will be. And
there's also a lot of other guys too: Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid. I mean,
but Kyle Pitts. I mean, come on, Kyle Pitts. There are other guys. Dalton Schultz in Houston had a big year. TJ's. I mean, he got hurt, but yeah, I would put TJ fourth and Dallas fifth last year behind the big three.
Ferguson's all right too, and I mean he's in Dallas and he's not.
Laporta's probably jumped over him. So but you can make an argument he's still fifth, and that's pretty good. So I don't know if he's overrated as much as he's the third option, and most of those other guys. Kelsey's the top option. Andrews is the top option when he's healthy. TJ was number 2. And maybe he's number 3 now coming off an injury because they have Jordan Addison now as well as Justin Jefferson. But, nobody's number 3 of that top group. Sam Laporta's number 2, maybe Jameson Williams, be finally healthy, usurps him behind St. Brown.
That Trey McBride in Arizona is kind of
he's good.
He's not there yet, but he's an interesting player. And then the other guy that came into the league this year, Brock Bowers. I mean, I think he's going to be a tremendous player. We'll see, how it goes.
Plus, you also have to realize that most of these guys we're talking about are strictly receivers. And
Dallas does other things.
Yeah. And that factors in a lot for me. Like if you ask me who the best tight end is, I always say Kittle because of that reason.
I would say Kittle's the most talented. Raw talent, athleticism, Kittle.
Well, I think most people would lean towards Travis because he puts up the numbers.
Well, Travis is the most productive tight end by far. Yeah.
Reception-wise, but, you couldn't block Zander Krause.
I don't know about that, Johnny Mac.
No. But, I mean, no
5'10", 180. Coming at you, Travis Kelce. Can you block it?
They're not asking Travis to do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to the blocking aspect. And George Kittle can blow people up as a blocker. So to me, that always, I remember, I got so much shit for telling Eagles fans that this was at the height of Zach Ertz when he was catching all those balls. And I said, so we're talking 2018 when Zach set the record. And I said, George Kittle was the best tight end in football. Oh, I got shit on like you wouldn't believe. I was right. I'm waiting for the apologies. They never seem to come. that year he caught 88 passes for 1,377 yards. George Kittle, I'm talking 10 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. But, and he was also the great blocker on top of it. And yeah, he was the all-pro, and he's been the best. But he's getting older, so you have to factor into that as well. He's now 30, so he's probably not at the height of his career, but he was still over 1,000 yards last year. He's just a great player, George Kittle.
Yeah, he is.
Great player. Big wrestling fan too, so I like that as well.
He got a big personality. George Kittle's a funny guy. I love some of the stuff he puts out there. Pretty interesting. Interesting dude. John, one other person I could go in the overrated column, and I think you'll probably understand where I'm going pretty quickly. And it falls on the offensive side of the football. Cam Jurgens. Not because I don't like Cam Jurgens, but it seems like a lot of people, myself included at times, completely myself included, where you're like, we just lost a Hall of Fame center. Like, and we're all like, okay, we're good at center. Cam Jurgens.
Well, that's I'm with you. I don't worry that much about Cam because Stout told me not to worry about Cam.
Yeah,
I think where he was overrated is as a guard. And I just told you the Justin Pugh story. And Stout kind of admitted in between, people took off with the center spot, and he was like, he's got no questions about Cam Jurgens as a center, but he had a lot of questions for him as a guard. And, if you look at it, he wasn't that good at guard last year, especially as a pass protector. And yet he was a Pro Bowl alternate, which, for the first time starting at a position he never played at is pretty good. But I think that had more to do with Jeff Stoutland's reputation, if you know what I mean. Like, all right, who we're going to vote for? We're just going to vote for Jurgens because, Stoutland's there. He was not very good in pass protection at guard. But at center, and it seems like the Eagles wanted Justin Pugh to come in to lock down that guard spot when he got hurt, and they couldn't get him. He was a little bit too loyal to the Giants, and he went to a crappy team, which probably made the wrong decision. But and he grew up an Eagles fan, by the way, Justin Pugh. But he developed a loyalty to the Giants. Yeah. So I think I agree with you at guard, but I think he's going to be fine at center. He's not going to be Kelsey.
Oh, yeah. When I say I think he's overrated. I don't think he's not. I think he's going to be great. I really do. I just think that we are losing Jason Kelsey. Like
he's not going to be. There's going to be.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some level of loss in that regard.
Oh, and, I mean, people who don't think that's going to be a loss, I can't help those people. I mean,
but I do think he's going to be really good, which is
a 6-time All-Pro, which is a more meaningful honor than Pro Bowl, to say the least. The Eagles have 3 6-time All-Pros in their history. That's it. And they've been around since 1933. They just said their birthday, by the way. Chuck Bednarik, Reggie White, Jason Kelsey. I mean, yeah, you're going to miss Jason Kelsey.
Yeah, we are. Good segment there for the overrated players. Yesterday we did the underrated players. So good stuff from Johnny Mac and I this week. We are going to about 24 minutes left to go on the show today. We'll take a commercial break. We'll come back. I'm going to close out the week talking some corners. I got some questions on Isaiah Rodgers. I like the player. I'm just trying to figure out what his role is going to be or where he's going to slot in. So we'll do all that coming up next on Birds 365. I want to thank everybody for being here. A lot of great comments today, Johnny Mac, as always. James Carver back in the mix. James, you weren't here. I thank you very much for your support of the channel. You dropped in 50 memberships, so we appreciate that very much, James. Fly Parks, Eduardo, Saquads, James Jones, our resident Commander fan, Kimberly Forte, Dabney, Bleed Green, Mike Fittery, Sam Fleming, Dre, Eagles X's and O's, Barbara Carroll, anybody I missed. I'm sorry for missing you, but I appreciate you being here. Suplex City, I see you in there now. Thank you all. Stay tuned, everybody. Birds 365 will be right back, and we'll close out this Friday edition of Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up. And go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back into a Friday edition of Birds 365, July 12th. 11 days out, everybody. 11 days out from the Eagles reporting to training camp. Can't get here soon enough. I'm excited to host this show all through the year. First year hosting it for me. During the season, it's going to be a very exciting year. I think the Eagles are going to have a pretty good season, so we'll see how it all plays out. Just 20 minutes of play here left on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, let's talk cornerbacks. Let's talk Isaiah Rodgers specifically first. How do you view him? I mean, look, he seems to be a guy that's very skilled. He obviously had the suspension, so the Eagles got him on a good deal, and they were patient enough to sit and wait as he served his suspension. Now he's back. He's a talented corner. What's the path to playing time, though, for Isaiah Rodgers, though, Johnny Mac? I mean, they drafted 2 corners, top of the draft this year. They have other guys out there that are potentially playing in there. They got Keely Ringo, a previous 4th-round pick. What's the path to playing time for Isaiah Rodgers, or is there a path to playing time?
Well, there is, but I don't think it's one that most Eagles fans would want, and that's he was very impressive in the spring. I think Christian Parker, who is the new secondary coach, kind of, said, all right, let's wait a little bit. Let's see the pads come on, because I think that was the one knock on Isaiah when he was sort of an ascending player in Indianapolis before the suspension. had a big missed tackle rate percentage wise. So maybe when the pads come on and it gets a little bit more physical, sort of mitigates probably the strength of his game, which is that speed. But for the most part, the reason I say you shouldn't hope for playing time is because, well, if he's playing, that probably means Quignon's not ready to play and Cooper's not ready to play. And you probably want Quignon to be ready to play and Cooper to be ready to play. So I think, settle down as a good backup cornerback and maybe the kick returner, maybe that's where he gets involved on a weekly basis with the new kick return rules. But look, you want Quignon Mitchell on the field. If you're an Eagles fan, you should.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, especially for the ripping the Band-Aid off,
Yeah. And, look at what the Chiefs did with Steve Spagnuolo. They played a bunch of young defensive backs, and they struggled for half of the season, early in the season. And all of a sudden, they're in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, and they're performing at a pretty high level, at least some good enough to win level, certainly. So, startup costs, Jim Schwartz, get him over with. But if I'm an Eagles fan, I want Quignon Mitchell on the field as early as possible, and I want Cooper DeJean on the field as early as possible. And if they're not, it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah, that's where I wonder with Isaiah Rodgers. So we'll see, how it breaks down at that position. I think they're going to try and get. Where do you think they'll try and get Cooper DeJean on the field? Do you think they're happy to put him at slot? I know they said they drafted him as an outside cornerback. That's where he played predominantly in college. I think he's talented enough to do it. There's been a lot of questions about whether he can play on the outside. I think he can. Do you think they're going to be comfortable putting him in the slot?
Well, I think all the questions with Cooper should be, can he play in the slot? Can he play inside? I think, that's the part that's all projection. All he did basically was 90% of the time was play outside in college. So that's what he's more comfortable with. Very similar to Tyler Steen, but a higher level. You're projecting a different position. Ultimately, I think he's a good football player. He's a good athlete. I know my buddy Jeff McLean got a lot of crap for asking the question about white cornerbacks. Let's be honest. That's a big part of it for a lot of people. They cannot wrap their heads around a white outside cornerback. But while you say that, and that's fine because that's the history of the game, the guy's a better athlete than 95% of the cornerbacks, no matter what they look like. His athleticism is off the charts. So I don't think he's going to have a problem from that standpoint playing in the NFL. That doesn't guarantee anything. Because, technique, fundamentals. He's also a smart football player. Probably would have been a first-round pick had he not gotten injured. And the Eagles are very excited to have him. But, you can throw on if you got some time, throw on his basketball highlights.
Oh, baby, he could play.
Just exploding off the floor. He runs 4.4. His vertical leap is near 40. His broad jump is outstanding. Everything about athleticism ain't his problem. So how do you get him on the field early? Well, you have Slay and you have Quignon Mitchell. So it's probably going to have to be in the slot. And I think the hope is that he can play the slot this year and then eventually move outside opposite Quignon Mitchell. I think that's the Eagles' plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll see how it all plays out. It's an interesting position. I mean, one of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier, a couple of weeks ago, and we haven't brought it up since, but, obviously when you're in the dog days of summer, you're talking about everything, every possible scenario, every possible piece of news, everything possible. That's just how it goes when you're talking about the Eagles for, every week of the year. But that was kind of my logic when we were talking about Darius Slay getting traded. Just in terms of, get the young guys out there, get them on the field, rip the Band-Aid off, prepare yourself to make a run with young guys. It's kind of what Kansas City did in a way. When they got rid of some of their older players, they went with the young guns, and it worked out well for them. I'm not saying it would work out like that for us. I'm just saying, I do see the upside in doing something like that when you can get the youngsters on the field, get them that playing time, and then you approach later in the year with a whole lot of experience in the young guys. And if any of them are worth anything, they're going to be good because they're going to have that experience.
Yeah. They got so many young corners. We haven't even brought up Kaylee Ringo, who I'm tremendously high on.
Yeah, I think he might be my favorite one.
Just to finish my thoughts on Cooper. So I looked it up while you were talking there, Zander. I've talked about Kent Lee Platt before. If you want to follow him at MathBomb on Twitter, X MathBomb, he goes through each year of the combine scores and grades prospects from an athletic testing scale, not only against the current prospects, but in the history. So Cooper DeJean as a cornerback prospect, out of 2,469 cornerbacks from 1987 to 2024, he ranked 28th. Let me say that again. 28th out of 2,469. That's how good he is as an athlete. You're muted.
That is insane, Johnny Mac.
Yeah. So that's why I say, people who don't think he is athletic enough to be an outside corner are way off base. Way off base. He might not be able to do it from a technique standpoint, fundamental standpoint, but to think people are going to out athleticize that guy ain't going to happen.
White man can jump in this regard with Cooper DeJean. I'm optimistic on both of our young corners. I think they're both going to be great. I hope they can get out on the field, as quick as possible. Johnny Mac, we have one more full week of shows to go, brother. Just one more week of full shows, before we're into it, the camp and everybody reporting and them going down there. We have next week, and then the following week, Monday, there'll be nothing. And then Tuesday, they report. Wednesday, they're on the practice field. So it's going to ramp up very quick. As we enter this last week, Johnny Mac, what's on your mind as you go into the camp? I mean, yes, Damo, has anything changed for you? Is anything on your mind that you're thinking about more now than you were a couple weeks ago? What's top of mind as we enter training camp just 11 days out?
No, I'm pretty concrete. The story of this season is going to be Jalen Hurts and how he mixes in with the new offense and Kellen Moore and what's going to happen. And I think it's going to be fine. Ultimately, I think Kellen's smart enough to build the offense around the quarterback and not vice versa, and forcing the quarterback to fit into a predetermined scheme, which I think if that happens, that's bad. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Kellen's too smart for that. He's got too much experience, not only coaching the position, but playing the position back in the day. So I think he realizes you got to take advantage of a particular player's skill set. But I do think there's going to be some hiccups. And I ran down the list yesterday of Jalen Hurts and all the different play callers he's had dating back to his college debut at Alabama. And you could sense the frustration of that this spring with another change. So I do think there's going to be some hiccups. But ultimately, I think it's going to be fine.
I do too. It'll be interesting to see it, but you're right. I mean, look, we could talk about everything. We could talk about the corners, the defense, all these different things. And to me, this whole season is it's Jalen Hurts. I mean, how far is he going to take us, or how far is he not going to take us? Like, if he's playing at a level comparable to 2022, I think the sky's the limit for this football team. If he's not, I don't know. I don't know how quickly it burns down or what that looks like, but that's what it comes down to for me. I'm watching Jalen Hurts, all eyes on Eagles quarterback one. Excited to see what he's able to do this year. Fun comment here, John. I want to bring it up because you always reference the people that hate J Mac. John, we like you. It's the Twitter goblins that don't. So don't forget that, brother. We appreciate the work you do. Say quads. We appreciate that comment. I always tell John there's more lovers than haters. The haters are just louder. So,
Yeah, it's always, well, I say the same thing about Jalen. That's kind of what, I mean, Jalen has a lot of haters. And that's why I don't, I think it kind of mitigates the overrated discussion. For the people that love him and are devoted to him, think he's a top 5 quarterback. Yeah, he is overrated. But there's so many of the opposite who vastly underrate him. I think it kind of evens itself out, at least in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good point here by Eduardo. Just doing a little chat check here. We got the last 7 minutes of the show. Appreciate everybody being here all through the dog days of summer. You guys are the backbone of JAKIB Sports. During the season, the numbers go up. There's more people watching the shows. There's more views. But when you get to July 12th and we still got all you guys in the chat, you guys are the backbone of the network, and we appreciate that very much. Eduardo says, I would love to go into the beginning of a season where we don't talk about Hurts adjusting to a new offense, in all honesty. It's a good point, Eduardo. And the last time we did that, we went to a Super Bowl because it was the second year with Shane Steichen. He came in, he played well. The offense clicked on all cylinders. They were a top 3-5 offense that year, and it worked out really well.
Well, and I think we're going to be talking about it early in the season anyway, because I think it's going to be, a situation where maybe you start clicking later in the season. And hopefully that's a good thing. I mean, it's great to get off to a 10-1 start, but obviously it doesn't guarantee anything because the Eagles fell apart last year. I'd rather be playing well late in the season than early in the season if that were the choice. So I think you're going to have some struggles early in the season, especially with the expectations. And then maybe they hit their stride a little bit later. That's not necessarily a bad thing. So it's going to be a story the whole year. That's just what it is. I mean, can I go down the list again? Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, Brian Daboll, Mike Loxley, Lincoln Riley, Doug Peterson, Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson, Kellen Moore. That's the history.
That's
of
a lot. Speaking of Lane Kiffin,
why he's frustrated.
Speaking of Lane Kiffin, we're RIP to Monty Kiffin, former NFL defensive coordinator. John, one other thing. I'm pissed I forgot to bring this up to the last 5 minutes, but I wanted to ask you about Jake Rosenberg. I mean, that was the one little piece of news. Former Eagles, personnel guy, worked closely with Howie Roseman.
By the way,
I got some messages though on Twitter yesterday from Howie and from Jalen. Were they off the record type things, or were they? Did you just get those messages, or were they prior?
No, Oklahoma announced it that they had made a deal. I knew it was coming.
Jake was kind of teasing it on Twitter.
But as far as the quotes, I got them through Oklahoma, but it was about somebody did. It was a great feedback, and said basically Jalen Hurts said more nice things about Jake Rosenberg than he has about Nick Sirianni in 2 years. Jalen obviously loves Oklahoma, for those who don't know. Went back there and graduated. So he loves Alabama, but he also loves
what was
Oklahoma.
That graduation like? Did he get his master's or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, he loves Oklahoma, and they reached out to get a quote from him, and he gave it. So that's kind of what happened. But and it's rare, as you know. So anytime Jalen speaks as well as he did about Jake Rosenberg, which is interesting. I mean, look, I've talked about Jake a lot over the years. People that listen to the show knew who he was. People who didn't probably didn't know who he was. But it was an interesting fact that he left the organization because he and Howie have been friends since they were young, and he's his longtime right-hand man, and he basically handled all the cap administration and negotiations for Howie. And he was a big deal in the organization, but, he wants to be an NFL GM, and he's kind of blocked here, so he wants to go elsewhere. And, it's interesting. The shifting of the landscape in college football maybe creates a better environment for those types, the front office types, because they can go to college now and help colleges who have to build up their football programs almost like an NFL front office now. And maybe that helps him get to where he wants to go. So, yeah, congratulations. I'm glad you brought it up to Jake. Good dude. Getting a higher profile, which was the goal. And yeah, Jalen and Howie said some nice things about him yesterday.
Yeah, he seems like a really smart dude, Jake Rosenberg. Somebody that's going to have a good future, good career in football, especially as you start to navigate the complexities of college and the NFL.
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. So when you have a guy like that who understands it, or is at least smart enough to get into the nitty gritty and understand it, obviously a good ad. So best of luck to Jake Rosenberg and the new company he's formed. So good stuff by him. Good stuff from Jalen. Good stuff from Howie in that regard. That's going to do it for the week, everybody. Just a minute left to go here on Birds 365. I had a lot of fun this week. We went through some of our training camp preview. We hit mostly offense this week. So we hit on the quarterbacks, we hit on the running backs, we hit on the tight ends. Today we did on the wide receivers. Johnny Mac, any tease for what's coming on SI.com in the next couple of days?
What do we got today? Today is interior offensive line, so we kind of addressed that on the show with Cam and Tyler Steen and the cast of thousands in the right guard conversation.
Yeah,
a little bit. Typically, you go into a season with the offensive line and say, "Oh, the Eagles are rock solid. They're good," but there's a little bit more uncertainty. Obviously, they're great with Jordan and Lane outside. And even Mekhi Becton as your swing tackle now, that's tremendous. And then Landon Dickerson is turning into a star. Big upside for Cam at center, I think. And then some issues at right guard you got to figure out. But still a top 5 offensive line, I would say, but more uncertainty than usual.
Yep, good stuff, Johnny Mac, this week. Good stuff to all of our viewers, all of our chatters. A good crowd today. 150 on YouTube right now, but still a lot on Twitter today, Johnny Mac. Over 650 watching over on Twitter. So thanks for everybody who tunes in all over on the JAKIB platforms. I want to thank our viewers once again, one final time. Eduardo Trey, James Carver, James Jones, Say Quads, 6'9". We appreciate you, brother. Twiz the Jigga. Everybody who's in the chat. Anybody I missed, Eagles, X's, and O's. Anybody I missed. I don't mean to miss you. I just view the ones that are right there at me, CZ, at this current time. But we appreciate all of you guys. Johnny Mac, appreciate you. Great week of shows, great intel, great content. As always, brother, most knowledgeable man in football, in my opinion, John McMullen. So you always learn something when you listen to Birds 365. Thank you, J-Mac. We'll see you on Monday. All right, man?
All right, sounds good. Everybody have a good weekend.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. Stay warm, or stay cool, I guess I should say. And we will see you on Monday on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.